All right, the topic for today is what every seller needs to know about home inspections. And one thing I've learned over 14 years of selling houses is that it's so much easier to be ahead of these problems than it is to react to the problem when it falls in your lap. You know, you work so hard to find the right house, or you work so hard to find the right buyer and negotiate everything, to then sometimes have inspection problems and you feel like you're back to where you started. So being ahead of these things is crazy helpful and crazy important. One thing we're seeing a lot of now is becoming more of a trend are pre-sale inspections. They're good for a couple of reasons. One is that when you know what the problems are with a house, you can fix them under your own terms, the way you want to fix them, you know, for a price point that you want to fix them with. It puts you in control versus reacting. So knowing what you're getting into before the house hits the market can be pretty helpful. Then, if there's issues that you choose not to fix or that you're aware of, you can use the residential disclosure to preempt those problems. So a reason, or a good example would be, when I sold my house, I knew I had a couple bad windows. So I didn't have to need an inspection to figure that out, but I wrote on my residential disclosure that I had 2 bad windows. So when a buyer did their home inspection, they found 3 bad windows and they asked me to replace all 3. Well, what I did was I went back and I said, well, wait a second, I already disclosed that these 2 windows were bad, so you don't really have a right to ask for that because you knew this up front, but I will fix the 1 window. So that very act of disclosing the issue ahead of time saved me $2,000 because it was about $1,000 a window. So crazy important. On relocation deals, it's not uncommon for the relocation company to do a pre-inspection and then make the buyer sign off on that pre-inspection or that inspection report then, so the buyer is aware of all those defects. Then if a buyer finds something new, you know, it becomes a negotiable item, but they've taken that entire inspection report off the table when it comes to the inspection negotiations. One thing we see a lot of is this term useful life expectancy, specifically in regard to HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, like your furnaces basically. So you might have a 20-year-old furnace that works perfectly fine, but the home inspector marks it as past its useful life expectancy, meaning, you know, the furnace is only designed for 12 to 15 years and it could go out any minute. Now, in my opinion, it's not defective because it's still working, but I certainly have had situations where the buyer comes back and says, the only way I'm going to buy this house is if you replace the furnace. It's rare, but it does happen. If you've got an old furnace, the best tool is to have it serviced before the inspection, because what the inspector will oftentimes do is they'll say they recommend further evaluation by a licensed contractor, where you can say, look, we already had it serviced and they said it was working fine. So that gets the home inspector out of the hot seat and it helps the seller, especially when you're dealing with an older furnace particularly, or air conditioner. These are some common defects I see a lot, and these are the easy ones that you can fix easily and just get off the table. Loose toilets. If you grab your toilet and you wobble it, you know, then technically, obviously it's getting loose. It can leak, which can cause all these other problems. So if you just tighten the bolt, you know, then it's off the table. Double tapped breakers. This is a little trickier, but if you take off the cover electrical panel, and every little switch should have 1 wire coming into it, but sometimes people will add a circuit and they'll put 2, so that's not proper. You know, it can be fixed. A double breaker is maybe $50. Super easy to do. If you know somebody that's mildly handy, they can do it. That's probably the second most. Roof boots. I also had this on my house. I see this all the time. I've got a seller today who we were talking about roof boots. It's when the pipe comes up through the roof, it's that little rubber boot that goes over it to keep the rain out. Well, over time of the sun and the cold and years, those will get old and they'll crack, and then water will get down in it. The boot themselves is only about $10. So it's real easy to be ahead of. If you haven't had your roof boots changed in 15, 20 years, it's something to think about. Always do it when you put a new roof on. It's about the easiest way. And then open junctions and slow draining. Sometimes in older houses and basements particularly, people will want to run another wire to put an extra plug in, and it'll just tie into an existing wire. Well, technically that splice where it's been tied in should be in its own electrical box for fire prevention. See a lot of those. It's real easy to fix. The electrical box is maybe $1. And slow drains. You know, if a drain isn't draining quickly enough, a home inspector will note it. You know, now the buyer doesn't know if there's all these other problems. So sometimes just checking your drains, checking the little traps, the little the little J traps under the sink. That's usually where the clogs are. These are real easy things to get ahead of, and then they just disappear. They're not on the table. Then you don't have to worry about them leading to bigger problems or bigger negotiations. The simpler things are, the less on the table to negotiate, the easier it makes for everybody. And these are real easy things to get ahead of. So keep this in mind if you're going through the process. If you have any other questions, feel free to let me know. And remember that I'm never too busy for your referrals. Thanks.